Welcome to Living the Spiral. This is a place to slow down, take a breath, and listen to the rhythms moving through your life. Here we explore astrology, human design, the I Ching, and elemental ancestral wheels of the year from cultures around the world. These are old maps and living languages that help us sense where we are in time, what is asking to unfold, and how we belong to something far larger than any single moment. In each episode, we trace patterns in the sky and in the body. We weave myth with lived experience, intuition with practice, and the personal with the collective. Living the Spiral is about learning how to move with change instead of pushing against it, about meeting transitions with curiosity, integrating polarities, and remembering that every season carries its own powerful wisdom. When you begin to listen to the cycles, life starts to feel more connected, more meaningful, and more alive. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is Living the Spiral podcast. Hello and welcome back to Living the Spiral. This is a podcast about learning to read the language that the world is always speaking through astrology, human design, and the deep ancestral wisdom of the Earth's changing seasons. My guest today is someone whose work I've been in relationship with for years, and getting to talk with her on the show feels like something that I've been building toward for a while. I was on her podcast, Moon to Moon, talking about Sagittarius season through the lens of human design back in 2024, and it was so wonderful this time to be on the other side, getting to learn about where she is today with her emergent process of building schools for astrologers and communities for magicians. This interview is a part of my ongoing series, Living the Spiral Magicians. And with this series, I wanted to sit down with people who are doing genuinely magical work in the world and ask them what that word even means to them, because I think the answers are just about as diverse as the people living them out. For me, magic is about recognizing something that was never not true, that we have an innate capacity to co-create with the universe, that we're not just being acted upon by life, but we're in an active, ongoing conversation with it. So this series is my way of following that thread through many different voices and practices, and I'm definitely learning something new in every single conversation. What I love about this particular conversation is how much of it lives in that territory that's between the mystical and the deeply practical. Britten and I talk about magic as change and what it takes to actually be available for change, not just open to the potential of it, but actually willing to be moved by change. We get into skill, and skill is a kind of devotional practice. She talks about it as a Saturnian, slow work of showing up until your magic becomes an extension of who you are and not something that you're grasping for. We talk about voice. That's not just about how we talk, but about choices and how it's every choice we make, every yes and every no. And we talk about the phrase that she carries at the center of her work, that there's no such thing as potential, there's only emergence. And I love that. I feel like this frame has the power to dissolve the kind of exhaustion that so many of us have been holding for a long time about proving our worth and living up to our potential. We also wandered into astrology as a living language instead of a predictive system, the difference between divination and fortune-telling, what shame has to do with desire, and why unshaming your desires is a skill that all of us can build. And we talked about her personal story, what it looked like for her to walk away from her PhD program, tell her professors that she was going to become an astrologer, and then just go ahead and do it. So this is a rich conversation. I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you all. So let's go ahead and dive in. This is Britten LaRue on Living the Spiral Magicians. My guest today has been doing amazing work at the intersection of astrology and intuition and self-trust for a really long time. And she's been doing it with such a beautiful kind of integrity that I really, truly admire. She is the creator of Emergence Astrology, the author of Living Astrology, and the host of Moon to Moon podcast. And she's also a steward of a whole community of people who are learning to trust the voice inside them. She's Britten LaRue, and I'm so happy to have her here on the podcast. Britten, welcome to Living the Spiral.
Thanks for having me, Allison.
Thanks so much for being here. I just started this series. I've done a couple of episodes, and you're the third person on the series of Living the Spiral Magicians. And I was really inspired by you. So it's so amazing to have you here. I joined the Magician's Table, one of your amazing containers. And part of the application process was asking if you have the audacity to claim yourself as a magician and to name yourself as a magician. It made such a profound impact on me to think about myself as a magician, and coming together with others who also claim that word is so amazing. And so I'd love to hear from you how you view that word and how you think about magic in the world.
Thank you. Yeah, oh goodness. I think at the basic level, magic is change. And so there's something about taking on being a magician that is acknowledgement that you're available for change, that you want change, that you can play with change, dance with change, call in change, surrender to change. Yeah, there's something about that I think is both really empowering and exciting about magic, but also it can also be frightening, right? Because there's the unknown of like what our bold moves as magicians will bring our way. And so I think a lot of being a magician is learning to trust yourself, just learning to trust yourself that the bold move that you're making right now to call in change is going to connect up with your future self, who's also very magical and who has even more tools than you have today. And they're going to take that change and create something cool with it, even if you don't know what it is today fully.
Yes, I love that so much. Change is one of my favorite words. I always think of Octavia Butler with change is God. I've quoted that so many times in her Earthseed series. And I really agree that you have to be available for changes. And especially in the world that we're living in today, I feel like there's so much change happening, whether we want it or not. And so to be able to navigate that is such a gift. And so thank you for creating a space where people can come together and learn how to navigate change through magic.
Yeah, yeah. I love bringing magical people together because you feel so much more emboldened when you're not alone.
Yes, absolutely. And you've created such a beautiful community of people throughout so many different offerings. And I'd love to hear today a little bit about your offerings and what is at your magician's table, which types of tools and which types of containers that you're really excited about right now. But before we dive into that, I'd love to hear just a little bit about how you describe your work in the world. I gave you a little intro, but I'd love to hear from your voice what it is that you do.
That's a great question. I'm always asking it. But yeah, I became taken with the word emergence pretty early in my career. There was this quote from Tokopah Turner. She spoke about emergence never happens all at once. And she spoke about this like swaddle that we push up against, and that sometimes we recognize this swaddle that was keeping us safe is now feeling too tight. And emergence being this availability to become the one that like opens the swaddle a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more over time, so that when you first start expanding your capacity for change, you may not even be able to fathom this capacity for taking on what's next. I was coming out of divorce, and in this time of being available to become, I really wanted to weave new ways of being. I wanted to believe it was possible that I could relate to myself differently, that I could relate to reality differently, that I could relate to other human beings differently, and that I wasn't just like stuck in the what I would now call like the shame lens of myself forever, like locked in. it was through intuition and astrology and the tarot that I began this slow unfurling process, this emergence process, and then began to invite people in. And so I do feel that in all my spaces, one of the big things that we're exploring is voice, because voice is deeply connected to emergence. Voice through the throat is not just speech utterances, but it's every decision that we make. It's every choice we make, speaking and not speaking, go this way, go that way. Everything is in our lives as we move through the horizontal plane of time space has to do with choices. And so our choices can be where we have so much despair and we have so much shame, like, why did I make that choice? I don't like the choices I'm making. I have dissonance in my choices. This is all throat and voice to me.
Yeah.
And so whatever container it is that someone's in with me, I think that at the heart of it, we're doing voice so that you can feel like I'm like a magician with your voice as you emerge day by day, choice by choice along your way. And you start to feel like, oh, I'm a person who leads my life forward through my voice that feels really good for me. And I like the choices I'm making. So I feel like all of this is skill. You know, like to me, the magician at the table, the magician has their tools. And so much of that comes through just skills building. Skill. I love the word skill because you work at it. Like you learn, you get resources, you find teachers, you practice, you show up. This isn't like I have it or I don't have it. You know, it's skill is something that you devote to. So being a magician, I think, has a lot to do with relating to change in a way that looks at the skills that you have, is like really honest with like, these are my real skills. These are the skills that I spend the most time with. I really love developing these skills. These are the skills I want. How can I find resources and teachers for that? Is there a community that can help me with this? Like, we really have to call in an agency as magicians to fine tune our skills so we trust ourselves and we trust ourselves in this craft. And then I think being a magician is tied to desire, because like, what do we even want? Like, what do we even want to do with these skills? Mm-hmm. What is the emergence you're after along your path, through your throat, through your voice and your choices? Shame comes in here because we've learned to not listen to so many of our desires, to shame any desire that competes with a picture of who we think we have to be or who we think makes us good versus not good. Desire is a skill in the sense that it takes skills practice to learn to even hear our desires and then honor them by attending to them, being the ones that claim responsibility for our own satisfaction with our desires. And then I think there's another element that is in a way also a skill, which is trusting in guidance, because there's like a mystical piece, I think, about magic that, you know, comes through us through the animated world, human and non-human, seen and unseen, whereby we are being shown and given so much support. And when we don't feel support in the human realm, there's so much support in the non-human realm. And learning to trust that guidance is a skill, because we have to practice asking, then paying attention to what we were given, and then actually going experiment what it's like to follow your guidance and see where it takes you. And so I think all of those things are sort of collaborating as skills that we can grow at our table. So I think you asked me something about what I do. I think through my different spaces, what I'm really interested in helping people cultivate is these various skills, like skill with the elements that you have gifts in, skill with listening to yourself and validating your desires and unshaming, and skill with trusting in what you're receiving through mystery, through these other kinds of listening types beyond the ear. Like we have all these ways we can receive information, including from one another, and learning how to trust in that and the weaving it all together becomes like the magician, doing their thing. Yeah. It's really fun. And we all have access to all of these skills. So it's not like some people are, I personally don't think muggles really exist. Like I think we're all magical. And I'm not really interested in playing a game around some people being more magical than others, because I just think over culturally, we've been conditioned to not listen, to not trust, to not play, to not tune in. And I'm interested in disrupting all of that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. But I mean,
kind of went off there.
No, I love it. I love the way it all weaves together and how it's evolved even since I've encountered your work years ago. I mean, I think I initially encountered your work through the lens of unshaming the signs. And to me, that was such a potent way to approach astrology. I think I'd been an astrology student for a long time at that point, and just seeing that you were really hitting the nail on the head with shame as something that was maybe prohibiting people from getting deeper into their own magic by having that wall or that blockade up against a stereotype or something that they had internalized as a part of them that had a negative connotation. To be able to look at the full spectrum of a sign or of a certain energy felt so empowering, just even seeing the words on a social media post. And I think it has affected a lot of people to be like, wait a second, I do have some judgment about this. And it is a skill building exercise to look at something like an energetic frequency, like a sign, and to go into it with a bit of open-mindedness, but without bypassing the fact that there is something that we bring to the table that kind of prohibits change in that more fluid, emergent way. So yeah, I love that. I love that framework. And I love that you're bringing in skill here. One of the gates of Gemini season in human design is the gate of skills. And I always think about, so we're just entering Gemini season now, and Gemini season and the end of Taurus season in the human design system have a lot of throat center gates within the body graph. And so we're at this season right now of focusing on the throat, focusing on sharing our voices, kind of cross-pollination. I heard it was World Bee Day today, so happy World Bee.
Aww.
And I love that fell right at the beginning of Gemini season, because I always associate Gemini, the twins, with pollination and cross-pollination and using our buzzy voices to be able to affect one another. But skill, yeah, I would love if you could elaborate just a little bit more on how magic is a skill. I'm curious if there's any deeper levels as far as this idea that anybody could be a magical being.
Yeah, I think skill is like a Saturnian love thing, like through the medium of time. It's the idea of being new at something. We are often afraid to go for it because in the culture that we've grown up in and we've been indoctrinated into, which is shame culture, there's this idea that we're supposed to already be like perfect at things. Like we can't just be people who are learning. And so, but before I could be a public astrologer, I had to kind of be an imposter at being a public astrologer and like make an IG live. Like I've only been doing this a year, like you have to start somewhere. But over time, you start to really anchor in to just like this trust with your skills. And that's Saturn. That's a Saturnian apprenticeship, is just trusting that time is going to grow the skill. One of the overcultural things we also deal with is urgency. And so, unfortunately, urgency in our bodies feels like scarcity. Somatically, urgency is really tough, but through time is how we grow skill. And so it's like expanding the capacity to trust that time will bring me what I'm wanting. And that means showing up and resourcing yourself and being with your devotional practice until it starts to just feel like such an extension of self. It's just such a joy to be in it. And in this way, we can grow skill anywhere in the chart with any planet. I don't want to think about it, any lack as like a deficiency that we can't support ourselves with. But also at the same time, I do think sometimes we have limits, like maybe we can't sing a certain note. And so skill is in writing the song so that it like speaks to that particular range where you are powerful, right? And just like growing the skill with the range that you have and channeling it through as potently as possible. So in many ways, limits at the same time provide this gift, because then we're not trying to be all the things at once. We can focus on being what most wants to move through us. And in that sense, I think body graphs and charts have a lot of support. What I love about both is I feel like, at least for birth charts, they're so vast and also so specific at the same time. And I love that paradox. Like all things are possible, and it was that particular degree that you're rising, that you have an ascendant. It's that particular degree where you have each thing, and the particularities are important as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I just got a reading by someone in the Magician's Table that was real sky reading, where it was using stellarium to look at how the sky looked when I was born, and then tracing that sunrise all the way to sunset and what the first sunset of my life looked like. And it was just this beautifully powerful
I just got chills.
reading. Yeah, that I'd never experienced. And I do experience the stars. I live out in the high desert of New Mexico, and so there's a lot of beautiful constellations and stars that I can see, but I'd never thought to go to a software to recreate the stars of the moment of my birth and what it actually looked like in the sky. And to me, that really hit home in a very deep way, as far as, okay, this was a moment in time that was so impactful. My first breath, that first heartbeat outside of the womb. I mean, to me, that feels very magical. Sometimes we can look at charts as just these flat circles on a page and get really lost in the symbols. And there's so much beauty and magic in symbols as well. But when it comes to that physical, somatic, kind of earth base, like I am on this earth and that is what the sky was doing. And just to really tap into that feels like, for me, that's how magic comes through, in just that beautiful embodied connection to the earth. And then knowing that over the course of your life, you can build skills through creating focus surrounding what that chart says. I think once I started looking into my charts, I started putting more boundaries and more parameters surrounding my infinite number of interests, by saying, oh, well, actually, that one interest that I was maybe a little more interested in, but had a bit of shame around wanting to chase because it didn't feel necessarily pragmatic or something like that. Once it came through as something that was kind of notarized on my chart, I was like, oh yeah, now that gives me permission to focus a little more and chase that a little bit. So yeah, I love what you're saying about discipline and that Saturnian edge of not having to do everything.
Yeah, totally. One of my Unshaming Gemini phrases is about how much more potent would your commitments be if you unshamed the parts of you that resist commitment. I just feel like there's so much wisdom in the inconjunct between Gemini and Capricorn, and the part of us that wants to commit and the part of us that's like, you can't make me commit. And like how they both, like if they have a good relationship, like what's possible, because then we're not at war with ourselves between I'm not committing enough and I don't want to commit, and like we could just have these parts of us that explore, and then the parts of us that I'm not going anywhere, but I'm staying right here with this. And maybe that's my having Jupiter and Gemini and then my Capricorn moon. Those are just big parts of who I am, and they both want to feel free.
But it's a different type of freedom.
Each in their own way.
I hadn't thought about that, the inconjunct between them, and how that can really make this potent tension that is towards the same end, towards the same goal.
I'm obsessed with the inconjuncts. I feel like Maybe I'll do a podcast series on that one day.
That'd be great.
I mean, like, they have a lot of really cool connections.
Yeah. Speaking of
Yeah.
astrology aspects and transits, I'm curious. I know that you have been doing this work of guidance and community building in astrology, and you're a writer. You've put out a lot of workbooks and a lot of containers and communities. I know you came from academia before entering the world of the mystic or the world of the magician. And I'm curious about kind of how that came about for you and how you really so fully entered this space of where you are now from a world of academia.
Yeah. I think if for people who love charts, it will be interesting to listen to this story knowing that I have the Jupiter and Gemini in the third, mutual reception with Mercury and Pisces in the 12th. Okay, I'm just going to leave that there for anyone who wants to listen for it. But because I think that mutual reception, the relationship between my Jupiter and Gemini and the Mercury in Pisces in each other's signs is like the connecting thread through my previous scholarly focus and my current scholarly focus. But yeah, I forever was in the field of art history. I first fell in love with art history the year after my dad had died suddenly of a heart attack when I was 16. I had to take art history, and I didn't have this word at the time, but I think I was astral projecting into the slides on the wall. And I was like entering the art, and I felt held. It was like the only relief in that time for me was art history class. Like the lights would go down, projector, and I could follow the history, like the information, but I was also in the symbol. Like I was in the symbolism and the beauty and like the sense of truth and like a larger truth that was making sense of life. Because at the time, like life did not make sense. Like, how does this happen? And so as I got older, I eventually felt really called to get a master's in art history. And as I got into it, I became much more Gemini with it. I was like very interested in theory and revisionist history and cross-disciplinary learning. I was always interdisciplinary. Like they couldn't make me commit because I was in art history, but I was like studying book art and like theater flyers and ephemera and posters and children's illustrations. And it was like I was constantly at the edges of the discipline. Finally, when I was in my PhD program, and meanwhile, I was also adjunct teaching for years while I was raising my two daughters. It was a great job to have when you also want to be home a lot. So I taught for years university lectures. And then in my PhD, I was studying missile silo architecture across the US and the Walt Disney book, Our Friend the Atom, and the way popular culture illustration was getting the American people on board with escalating atomic weapons and defense. It was so Plutonic, like so Pluto. My interest there, just like what they're trying to have power over. How does overculture use art to manipulate us into getting on board with things? I was really interested in that. So when I found astrology, I had been looking at symbol and line and pattern with text for years and years, but I didn't know charts existed until after I separated from my ex-husband in a very mystical time when the Neptune was on my sun.
Okay,
in Pisces.
Yeah.
It was Neptune on my sun. And I just was like, the moon is talking to me. Like it became so mystical. It was like very close to the edge of, am I losing my mind? But I felt so sober and called with such clarity into a studying intuition. And my brother gave me my chart. He was living in LA at the time, and astrology was getting big there before it was big in Texas and everywhere.
Totally.
Like earlier in Neptune and Pisces.
Uh-huh.
And He's like, I got the birth sign from mom. I think you'll really like this. And he gave me links to like Deborah Silverman and YouTube and Chani Nicholas's like new moon teaching. And but looking at that chart, I was like, I know that I could read this. It was so compelling to me aesthetically.
Yeah.
So that drew me in to go learn. And then 6 months later, I told my professors I'm not going to do my dissertation defense. I'm going to become an astrologer. I mean, it's wild.
And you actually said that to them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're just like, okay. My mom is just like, you're throwing your life away. She was convinced that people wouldn't let my daughter spend the night at their house if I came out as a tarot reader on Instagram, And I was just, but my guidance was so strong. I just felt so held. I was like, I know what I'm doing. So anyway, then just the language of astrology began to hold me, like kind of like back when my dad died and I was into the slides. Like I felt held. It's like another kind of symbolic language. It has a rich intellectual side to it as well. I loved Demetra George and Chani's real smart way of talking and clever phrases and good questions. And yeah, so it sort of held me into a new career. And I was an adjunct teacher, continued to do that for 3 years. My ex was giving me 3 years of spousal support. And I was like,
good runway.
In 3 years, I'm going to replace what he's giving me with my own income from this. And it timed perfect. And then that was my last also semester teaching because my income had increased so much that I realized I don't need to adjunct teach anymore either. So it was very fast trajectory.
So you knew from the get-go that it would be a career move and something
I did.
that you would make money
It was
with.
very, I mean, it would sound, that's why I use the phrase a lot, delusional dream, because it was like a delusional dream. I told my brother I was going to teach the tarot and I hadn't bought my first deck yet. And I was telling him like, I'm going to do these things. It was so wild.
Yeah.
But I became very isolated, like a hermit, because I just only wanted to hear my guides. I didn't want to hear other humans because any human I told this to, their eyes would get all big, like, Britten, I'm worried for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to listen to the moon and to my guides. And once I have enough evidence, I can start like having more human friendships. But so one of the reasons I've wanted so much to create community is for the very reason of so that it's not so isolating, It's not so isolating when you have people to talk to and they can reflect like, I see it too. Like they can reflect back. I see the vision you're speaking. Yeah. I see what you're doing. I see the gifts that are coming through you, because it can be very isolating to get really serious with your magical modality, especially if it's considered taboo by the people around you.
Yes, what a gift to create spaces for people to engage with each other in this depth of a way where it doesn't feel strange at all. It doesn't feel like you have to hold anything back. And that is it's such a gift, truly. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I had a circle, kind of a coven when I was 13, and I would go to the ARC bookstore here in Santa Fe and pick up magical books back in the day. And as a 12-year-old, and I've always been into it. And then I think that there was a time when the woo became too shameful. That word of just like, oh, it's a little woo, or you'd have to have a disclaimer around any type of interest. Up until I think you're right, the Neptune and Pisces era really brought it out into the public field a lot. And it doesn't feel nearly as taboo anymore, at least in Santa Fe. But in a lot of places it still is. And I do think that to always have to have a little bit of a filter when you're talking about what it is that you deeply love and what you're deeply moved by, and then to move into a room where you have people who understand the language you're speaking, because you're talking about voice being such an important piece of this.
Yes.
And if you can't use your voice fully because it's not being received and it's not landing, then you're always going to keep trimming that down to be more palatable or lowest common denominator or have a disclaimer slapped on it. And so to create these spaces is truly a gift. I am so grateful for the containers that I've been in with you, the Mystics Making Money and the Magician's Table, of course, and Underdog to Diva. I love you, the names for your containers. They're so good. But they've all been places in which I've met people who, when they first step in, there's a little bit of that kind of like toe into the swimming pool. Like, I don't know, is this a safe space here? And then by the end, it's just, yeah, what can come out of people like a fountain of just that becoming and discovering who they are through speaking it out is so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I pulled a quote from your About page that says, I built a home inside myself where it would be safe to emerge. And that really spoke to me as far as having a community is so important. But then there's also that building that home within your own self. And you've mentioned doing a lot of solo work in the early days and talking to the moon and receiving from your guides as the only people who could really witness this. But I'm curious when you first felt that pull to the cosmos. Was it before your brother sent that reading? Did you have a relationship with the ineffable before that time, or was it arriving in your life with a bang at that point?
Yeah. Well, for sure, as a kid, I was very imaginative and into fairy tales and myths. And I grew up going up to Minnesota to our little family cabin on the lake up there, and just barefoot all day and talking to all the creatures and the moss. And the element, though, that I probably was the most connected to was the wind, air. I used to put my hands up and talk to the wind. And what's really interesting is after my dad died, there was this breeze that came one day on a walk, and I knew it was him. And then after that, I had this sense that in important moments, that's like the technology or what that he comes to me through. And I was always a very spiritual person. Like, I was like yes to Jesus very young. My parents were not religious, but I felt love, and I just always felt, oh, Jesus is the word for the love that I feel around us. Then I believe in Jesus, because Jesus is definitely real and in my heart, using the language of adults around me. But yeah, it kind of there was sort of like this dip, with middle school and life and lots of theft of innocence in various ways and trauma. And yeah, I think that I felt the cosmos through my daughters,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was for sure in their eyes. It was in their smiles. It was like, definitely there's something sacred in this world. And I really loved talking about art with my whole self, but it was disillusioning because you're giving people grades. They just want to pass. There's something like defeating about the whole experience of being in the university system. It's a pretty sad place in many ways, even though it's also a place of liberation in other ways.
Yeah.
It was way more liberating when I was a student. And then the periods where I was a teacher, it felt sad.
Yeah.
And so when I found that particular year, I started taking intuitive healing. We had moved to Maui. My husband really wanted to get us out of Dallas, and I was always up for moving. So we moved, and I started taking these classes called intuitive healing because I met people that were like, you need to study with Deborah. This is Deborah Cremens, my teacher. I worked with her 3 years, and I just started to learn intuition. And within a few months, I was like seeing so much information especially vis-a-vis my relationship to other people and what I was holding for them. And so I started to like not hold those things anymore and just be in my own energy. And very quickly, I had this experience of the moon talking to me the summer of 2017. And I really felt like the moon was telling me that it's time. Time for what? I didn't really know, but it's time for you to come home, is basically the idea. And as I listened to that for a few more weeks, what it was I need to ask for a divorce. So that mystical thing started slightly before finding astrology through intuition in the moon. And that's when I Googled like working with the moon ? I found like Sarah Faith Gottesdiener's many moons, her old workbooks that she did before
I
the
used
planners.
To get those every year.
Yeah, so good. Oh my God.
I know.
And she's got that smart grad school way of talking. So I trusted it, and so I got into like, okay, a lunar ritual, a new moon. Okay, just like started learning.
Yeah.
And then once the signs got attached to it as I learned astrology and then bringing more planets in, it just started to explode and was like, this is the only thing that matters to me now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took over as it does, I remember when I first learned that a new moon in any given season is the same as the zodiac season you're in, and the full moon is the opposite.
Yeah.
Because for a while it just seemed so random. It was like, oh, new moon in Taurus, what is that? Like, how would you know? I'm thinking back to the early days of when I was interested in, I'd read some horoscopes, but I didn't know how it all worked. And to me, once I found out, I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone should absolutely know this.
This is
This should be
really
baseline
central.
first grade kind of stuff, because it's how the universe works, it's how the solar system works. And we don't learn about it in that way. And then you learn about it through these kind of like side channels that have this woo label or this kind of mystical thing. And it's really like, no, this is the earth is here, the sun is here, the moon is here. And so for me, it's just, I think I relate to you, and I always have, because of I thought I was going into academia as well at a certain point, and I remember asking my professors about their personal life at one point when I was studying international development, and I was really wanting to go that route. And I would sit outside my professor's doors and ask them the deepest questions, and we could go off on all of these really interesting tangents. But then I would ask them about what their life was like. Were they friends with the other professors? And, what did they do for fun? And what I heard on repeat was that it was just a very competitive atmosphere. And for me, the joy of learning when I was a student as well was so much about these interconnections that could happen, where you would take lots of different courses and then all of the different threads would weave together. And for me, the magic of learning anything is being able to connect the dots. And so I feel like the way that astrology and these systems of connecting to the stars and to the planets and to our own history through that provides this kind of infinite source of being able to connect dots between all of the things. And so I think that having that type of mind of wanting to know, that mercurial mind of wanting to know the details, and also the expansive Jupiterian that you were talking about, that's about looking at the biggest picture as well. I really relate to what it is you're saying there. I think you've introduced this world of astrology and how it's not a system of prediction necessarily, but it's a system of emergence to people who might otherwise feel a little bit afraid of it or feel like it's going to close them into too much of a box. Instead, you're providing this opposite philosophy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on prediction and your thoughts about kind of how that works.
Yeah, I want to say, I think that I don't remember how I started following you, but I remember thinking like, oh, we're onto the similar thing, because you are clearly weaving so many things together, because the associative quality, the interconnections is like the most fun thing ever. You can never, ever be bored. Like,
Exactly.
It's just not possible.
Yeah, when I discovered, I was like, I could do this for the rest of my life, and I've never found anything else that I could just say that definitively. I'm like, this is forever. Yeah, for the next.
I will never know
lifetimes.
everything. You know, it's like,
yeah,
and even just the foundations, like sign, modality, element. Every time I sit down to teach from those from the most basic place of astrology, I am like tears in my eyes moved by how beautiful it is and how it comes through a different way every time. And it's just like, what's better than this, you know? Yeah. So prediction, you know, it just, part of it is like, speaking of skill, like I think prediction, the predictive aspects of astrology, like it wasn't enlivening in me. Like it's just sort of like, it just didn't come into my field of view to see astrology this way. To me, it was always so associative, and it was all about holding us and helping us feel connected to something bigger and helping us see our vastness, but also unshame our specificities. And those are the things I was paying attention to. So when I entered the public forum after this deep hermitage with myself and astrology, I was kind of like surprised often by how I was seeing it spoken. And I do think that locating frustration is really helpful to unshame being irritated, because your irritations are guiding you to say like, well, how would you like it to be? You know, like, how do you want it to be? Because when you're a beginner, you feel like you have to follow the rules somehow. Like you feel like you have to prove that you did the rules well. Of course, that's also coming from academia. But there was a part of me that I just really didn't want to do that. I've been in academia. Like I was doing that for 2 decades. I don't want to go to conferences. Like I want to speak the way I want to speak it with anyone who will listen. So Instagram was a great place to enter, because it's a different place now than it was in 2018 when I entered it. But still, the truth is, I still meet wonderful people there. And it is still a way to find people who are saying beautiful things that are coming from their hearts. And that is really special. You know, we live all over the world from each other. So it's interesting, though, to think about prediction versus divination. I feel like prediction just isn't helpful when it's not addressing the person in front of you with where they're at, where they are. Just because you can see that certain things might happen, how is that holding them in their humanity in this moment, and all that's on their heart and what's keeping them up at night, and how they're trying to navigate things in their relationships? Like, I just want to be with where they are and let that, what emerges from them sharing themselves, be where I then tend. And what good is it to talk to someone about like Saturn going through their 7th house and what they want from that, when what's happening is there's like some part of them that's so lonely, and they need a place to talk about that. Right. So like it came from like these frustrations of like what clients were coming to me for, and me wanting to be like, but can we talk about the thing under the thing though? You know, like, I think that what would be really helpful is if we could talk about why you have to have that right now. And so slowly I started to realize, like, I think I need disclaimers for my readings. Or like, I think I really need to help people understand like what I'm not going to do with you is I'm not interested in that. I'm just not interested. I really want to have real, authentic conversations with where people are at right now. And then I know that astrology will surround them when we speak it from there.
Yeah.
And they will feel so held, and it's going to be so beautiful. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's going to be my way. I'm not going to do what I think I have to do. And so that's kind of been like the whole career move with
And
everything.
It's working. I have to say, I'll point out, it seems like it's working. And there's so many ways to do this, but to have that audacity to be a little bit different when you're entering, for me as well, it was more of a personal journey. And then entering the field and realizing, oh, there's a whole society around this in and of itself. And I think one reason why, when I discovered human design and I saw the book that said the science of differentiation, and then the fact that it's about deconditioning as the kind of baseline, there are certain terms and frames that I bring to astrology from that world of just This is about deconditioning from the
Mm-hmm.
overculture, deconditioning from our family systems, and really just kind of untethering ourselves from the ways that we have been shoulding ourselves or being told that we should do something or we have to do something a certain way, because the snowflake that is your chart and that is your the way that you're reading it, even it's not even a defined thing, but you're able to look at that and say, okay, I can really attune to this specificity and not have to then glom on something that's one size fits all for everyone. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
also
so the
love
way
like
that
the not self, and it's such a great
right.
term.
And,
Yeah.
but it is a unique, just like the fingerprint, the truly one of a kind that every chart shows that we are, and to be able to live into that fully is such a beautiful assignment in this life, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think divination is like such a different thing, even though it also is dealing with possible futures, right? But I think before divination can be really held, there has to be enough unshaming, deconditioning to have self-trust, but also trust in the universe, to be in a dance with divination in a way that was like feels really good. It feels really empowering. It's not something you have to manage. There's like this trust that you're being held in the unfolding of the divination. And oh my gosh, the wonder and awe of like it's unfolding just as the card said, but I didn't imagine it would be like this, like that feeling is so amazing. But I think there's like, until you have practiced the skill of trust long enough, it can feel like a managerial or fear based, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think divination itself is a really empowering magical skill, and it wants the time that you've given to trusting in the guidance, so that if what's being divined is, the tower, you're still game to find out what that's actually going to unfold as.
Oh, totally. Yeah, right. Infinite possibility within the tower moment,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
May
It's
the
like,
most liberating thing unfold for me.
yeah, to go in. I mean, I think it's that possibility versus probability. It's not, you're not putting
Mm-hmm.
yourself in another box of the amount of pop astrologers who are like, okay, I'm going to make this prediction about politics. And then the amount of people who get so angry, like, you said it was going to be this way. And that whole dynamic is just, to me, I'm just like, really? This is not what this is about.
Oh my God.
This.
Yeah, I know. It makes me sad. Like the psychics too. Like I want the psychics to be right on this with a prediction, but oh
Uh-huh.
no,
Yeah,
so
it's a fun game, but
not
it's,
yet.
yeah. But bringing in the possibility, I really, yeah. I mean, one thing that you've said that really struck me was that there's no such thing as potential.
Yeah, oh my gosh. This is for everyone who has felt such violence from this idea of potential, whether because you were told that you have to live up to your potential, that you're not living up to your potential, or that you have no potential. I mean, there's a lot about this that I think is just incredibly harmful to put on people. And then we put it on ourselves. And for me, what it looks like energetically, the potential that I mean for the way we've been brought up with it, as opposed to like a potentiality that we might be able to explore as having truth. But to me, like potential always felt like a thing out in the future that if I could just figure out how to get on the path to it, everything would be okay. I would be a success. My life would be worth it. That my parents having raised me would have not been a waste of their time, that I didn't fuck it up. And so I think when you're in your 20s, you're just kind of like, any day now, I'm going to like definitely be on that potential path. I can feel it. Maybe it's coming. And for me, it was in my 30s where I just started to really feel depleted and just kind of exhausted from the striving, and just feeling like, I think I might be fucking this up. Like, there's not enough time. Like, oh, I got to take care of my kids and I got to do it. Like, like, when am I going to unlock my potential, and like you take the classes and you read the books, if I could just unlock this, if I could just maximize it, if I could just harness it, all these extractive colonial words. And what's funny is that I always thought that I had the potential to be like an author. Like I'm going to have a book and I'm going to be a teacher. And then I threw everything away. I threw that whole thing away. And then what rose up from me basically just like, I may never have money like the way I imagine what having money means. I may never have these things. I may never have success. I may never be understood. I just want to do this. I just want to be in this forever, this woo path, my magical path. And then sure enough, I become a head of my own school and a published author. It's just like such a wild thing. Yeah. But to me, so I came to this phrasing, there's no potential, there's only emergence, because emergence is staying with the present moment and creating the path from there, just trusting that like we're always on our way towards that, what we're meant for. We don't have to think that it's a path that we can't even see. It's right here. It's emerging at our feet from desire, from skill, from the dream, from guidance. And we're just tuning into it one step at a time, one day at a time. And I don't think that we understand ourselves at all in our fullness until we die. I have not died before, so I don't know. But what I imagine is that we can only ever really see a portion of ourselves at once. And then when we die, we get to experience our multitudes, I imagine. And that is the potential in a way, is like the one we meet when we die. So how do we want to feel about that, And I want it to come from the inner place rather than that exhaustion, depletion, shame place.
Yeah. I think by choosing the magical path, you are choosing a path of being in relationship with more than yourself. Even if it can feel lonely at first, there is a certain amount of you're welcoming in that conversation with the moon and with the ancestors and with all of these different pathways and with you as a future ancestor and what will come in after death, and just opening up the scope of what you're willing to relate to. And that feels liberating in a certain way, in a big way, I would say. And, I think the word emergent to me, I love that you've brought it so closely into your work and your different offerings. I remember reading Emergence Astrology by Adrienne Marie Brown a while ago, probably about a decade ago.
Yes.
And it was so incredible just to think about how we're working with, again, that more than human realm, the birds, the geese that are flying, and how there's not one head goose that's living into its full potential. Within a flock of geese, there will be a goose that falls back and another one that comes up to the forefront. And the way that animals and plant life work is not in this, I have to be the one that's at the top of the pyramid. It's this more relational way of being. And so when you talk about emergence as a framework to attune to your own self and your own becoming, it just feels like so powerful to just be reminded that feels alive any given moment. Like there could be changes that happen there, but it's still a safe container to exist. You don't have to be worried that, that the rug is going to be pulled out from under you, because the framework is built on a foundation of change and of whatever is alive coming into being. And so with that being said, I'd love if you could tell us about what's happening in your world that is shifting and changing, or if there's anything happening right now that feels particularly emergent for you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in a period of restructuring right now. I just went on this huge experiment in building a community, Living Emergence, and I followed what I thought was the picture that I wanted for it in terms of my other offerings, like putting certain offerings in a resource library, some of my key things, building a home for people to find each other, to play with each other, to connect to each other, support each other, share what they're up to. And I knew that I was just going to watch it for a while and watch how to respond to it. Like, give it time to breathe and build its own self up. And then notice, like, okay, what does it need and where does it fit in within the larger ecosystem of my offerings, like the Magician's Table, this year it being the 6th year, Mystics Making Money, which is a seasonal series that I'm doing for 3 years. It's a long-term project. And then Emergence Astrology Pathway, which is a 1 to 3 year program of mystical astrology. And what I began to see is that when I created Emergence Astrology Pathway, it was a big emergence thing. It was very like, I don't know what I'm doing, but let's just see what happens. And that was amazing. And like the perfect people came for that. Like they came for that. But over time, the other potent, mature offerings that I had started to get just kind of like banked into and not used, and I realized like, oh my gosh, I really want to restructure so I can be clear on what Living Emergence is. It's a community space. It's not a school. And Emergence Astrology Pathway, rewriting the curriculum so that it's like we could just, if you composted moon to moon, seeding the year, cave space, unshaming your chart, all of these powerful small containers, if you composted them, what would grow out of it? It would be now what I'm writing as the new curriculum, which is coming through so easy because it's not as emergent in the sense that I've been stewarding those teachings for years. They're like the core things. And it all starts with the moon, because the moon was where I started, and the moon, teaching on the moon was my first teaching publicly beyond academia. So I'm really excited, and it's very scary though. Like when you first sense, I'm sure you've had this, you and anyone listening, when you first sense like a kind of dissonance or there's like a sense, you can feel it in your body that something's not quite right. There's a lot of dread, it's just a lot of dread and like, oh gosh, change is coming, like,
right. The infinite
like
potential.
it's like summoning the energy, just like, okay, I started to feel it months ago, but I'm like doing the promo for the Magician's Table. Like I need to stay focused. I'll talk to you later, dissonance. And then, just really been in so much time with myself and my guides listening to do this in a way that feels like uncovering the most intelligent way to do something, like it's intelligent because it's got an elegant framing. It's got like a design that feels like it couldn't be any other way but that. Like I'm always wanting that, but it's hard. You can't really, for me, engineer it. It has to like come through more in like a download form. So just been really in that space of stewardship, tending, and then it feels good now to be like, all right, this is the plan. If you're still interested in playing with me, I hope so. This is how it's going to be now. And this way, the edges of each thing will feel very defined, which I like. And I just think that this is part of being a magical person at your table in the marketplace. It's just time passes and you start to sense the updates that want to happen.
Yeah.
And then you listen. Doesn't have to be urgent. And then you start to just know, yes, this is how it needs to be. Now I go forward in making it so. I just really love it.
So you're talking about just honing in on, you have this platform, this community where people can be a member.
Like, what's the difference?
Partake, and then there's the pathway of the container of learning astrology through that mystical container.
Yes.
Over the course of years, and they're going to parcel out a little bit.
Yeah, like Living Emergence as ongoing place to practice and be together. It's a gentler commitment, and it's excellent too for integration, staying with a thing that matters to you without the building like a momentum of a high investment learning process.
Mm-hmm.
Where so Emergence Astrology Pathway will more clearly be like, you have now entered and we are in a path and it's building, there's momentum, you're moving, you're feeling like a lot of change and you've called it in, you've invested in it. It's more clear. Each one can be very clear in what it would offer you and what the value is. And I feel like just it's so Taurus that I was working through all of that with Taurus, just as it relates to value and like really sensing the right design to hold the potency of the value. Yeah. And then being able to be like, this is what this has, and this is what this has. It felt like a lot of Taurian tending.
Ooh, yeah, it's so material. It's so environmental and stable.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I think that is one thing that now that I think about it and I hear it this way, one thing that I love about your work so much is that, the magician's table is a table. There's a physical, knock on wood kind of you would gather around in a meditation around the table and you envision all these people who are no longer just squares on Zoom, little faces from all around the world as these little digital icons on Zoom. They're now in your imaginal realm around this table or in this playground that we go to every week where you're in a physical space, even though we're in this imaginal digital space. And so what it sounds like to me, that you're doing with this is that there is the pathway that is active. If you're on a path, you're going to be walking that path. You're not having a picnic on the middle of the path.
Yeah, totally.
You're moving through it and you're actively, you're like putting a little muscle into that. And then there's the more like the town square kind of vibe of like where you learn from osmosis and you never know what might come up.
Yeah, totally.
Be a juggler in the plaza over there, But just thinking about it as spaces, I think it feels like the metaverse or whatever. There was like this whole idea that there would be a metaverse a while ago on Facebook or something like that, where it was like we'd all be avatars walking around this digital realm. Totally. And that didn't pan out so well, but I do feel like digital creators, as we are connecting across borders, across the globe, I don't want that to end. But I do think that there is this desire to have a little bit more of a tangible place you can rest into and know where it is that you are. And so I love this change. This feels really beautiful. I can see it very clearly in my imagination.
Yeah, I love like architectural, the sense for it, even though it is in the imaginal. It feels very real is what I want it to feel like. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting a glimpse into how the emergence works for you. And it's so inspiring to see that you don't have to kill one thing before another thing grows. I mean, that's not how the world works. If you think about a rebrand or something, or like, taking something out of another thing and doing surgery and reassembling it, you don't know if it's going to make it right to the next level. But to think of it as more like, oh, actually, let's just take all of these things and they've all been alive and flourishing. And that makes great compost. Like what was alive, put it in and make it a completely new thing rather than trying to piecemeal it away too much. I'm getting a lot from that.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all these metaphors, but they're real. They're in our bodies of like how these things work. Our creations do work like the biological, physical world, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, this has been such a joy to hear all about what you're up to and the changes that are happening. And yeah, if you could just share how people can find you and work with you.
Yes, at Britten LaRue. I'm very active on Instagram. I have always been. So that's a great intro. My book, Living Astrology, my podcast, Moon to Moon, Emergence Astrology Pathway enrollment will be summer solstice. So if someone hears it for them, they're interested, the course page should be ready soon. And then, yeah, if you're kind of in any of those places, you'll be entering my world and know what's going on and jump on in. Unshaming Gemini is really, Mama's got her favorite. I love Unshaming Gemini. So I'll be doing all that content in June if you want to go get in on that. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Unshaming Gemini is the first recording that I ever bought from you, I think,
Oh,
because
cool.
I have my Chiron in Gemini and my North Node. And so it's this kind of battle of like I have hunger and I'm being driven towards this Gemini realm. And as we enter Gemini season, I'm very much feeling it. I'm like, I love the Gemini. I love the pollinator energy that's alive right now. But I also have this wound there, the wounded healer. And so it's a lot of work. And I remember initially I was like, I need to get that one. So yeah, highly recommend.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Allison.
Yeah. Well, have a beautiful rest of your day. And thanks again for creating all of these spaces for us magicians to come together and meet each other and share our voices.
Thank you. You're welcome. This was so fun.